So tonight, this week's Parsha is a double Parsha, but it's a double Parshiot, Acharei Mot-Kedoshim. And in fact, these Parshiot are often the Parshiot for our CBST annual retreat. Good news is next year our retreat will be this weekend. Please God. We have already reserved the Isabella Friedman camp for the retreat next year, and we can't wait for all of us to be together for the retreat in Isabella Friedman. But so it's the funny part that this Parsha is always or these Parshiot, or sometimes one or the other, depending on what's happening for the rest of the year, but I'm not going to explain that now, is the Parsha that has the Leviticus 18:22 line that says that a man should not lie with another man as with a woman. It is an abomination. That one little sentence, which gets repeated, so it appears twice, is the source of so much pain in our universe. I want to talk a little bit about it tonight. I have given so many drashot and taught so many classes about other ways to understand this verse. But now I want to acknowledge that this verse is the foundation for so much oppression of LGBT people around the world. The oppression of LGBT people can be seen as being in three different categories. The criminal justice system can call it a crime. And historically, that has been very common here in the United States. It was a crime up until very, very recently. It is still a crime in many, many countries in the world. And in X number of countries, and I don't know the number, it's actually a crime punishable by death. Many of those countries will quote this verse in the Bible, and religion itself is the source. But it can be seen as a crime, or as happened in this country, which was seen as a progressive thing in the moment, was that it was seen by psychology as a sickness that could be cured, a sickness that would make the world feel sorry for gay people, as opposed to a crime for which gay people, LGBT people, needed to be punished. So there's the criminal, the sick one, and then the third category is that religion, rooted in this very verse, identified it as a sin. So we have these three categories of crime, sickness, or sin, or criminal, sick person, or a sinner. Those three categories are really important when you think about the oppression of LGBT people. And it makes a difference how you approach liberation. And in this country, we've gone through different stages with each of those categories. And it is no longer a crime in this country. That's thanks to the Supreme Court. Even while it was a crime in some states and it was not a crime in other states, it took the Supreme Court in a decision of only a few years ago to say that that LGBT people had some coverage of federal civil rights, and therefore a state could not call it a crime. And until 1973, here in this country, it was a sickness in the manual of diagnosed illnesses that the American Psychiatric Association declared. So we have these three areas: criminal, sickness, and religion. Now, famously, those of us who remember those days and those of us who have studied the history, the transformation from it being a sickness in this country to being removed from a category of sickness was a long and complicated struggle, well worthy of every one of us being aware of its history. Tonight, I don't have the time to go into it in depth, and I really recommend all of us understanding it because it's horrifying on one side and then liberating on the other. During World War II, there was a lot of tension about how to treat gay people, homosexuals who were in the army. And there was they were, up until recently, as we know, dishonorably discharged. And there were those who, as early as World War II, thought it was progressive to say it was not criminal, it was a sickness. The leader of that in the psychological world here in this country was a very famous psychiatrist who made most of his career based on treating homosexuality. His name was Charles Socarides, and he believed, and he famously taught that, and I quote now, homosexuality is caused by a controlling mother who prevents her son from separating from her, and a weak or rejecting father who does not serve as a role model for his son or support his efforts to escape from the mother. The focus, of course, as always, was on men and was on male homosexuality. But both for women and men, it was considered a illness, a sickness. And Socarides claimed that he had a very high rate of curing homosexuals. And in 1970, the American Psychiatric Association had their meeting in San Francisco. Gay people in San Francisco crashed the party, so to speak. Many famous demonstrations that are worth reading about if you have time, and objected to the fact that the APA had as its list of an illness homosexuality. And famously, 3 years later, and it's an amazing story, Socarides fought against this, but the APA finally voted to remove homosexuality from the category of illness. Socarides, until he died, fought against that change, objected to it, founded another psychiatric association that would continue to consider homosexuality an illness. And when he died, he was quite bitter because he believed he could cure homosexuals. P.S. to that story, for those who know where I'm going with this, Charles Socarides had several sons. One of his sons was named Richard Socarides, who turned out to be gay. And Richard Socarides was the gay liaison for the Clinton White House and remained very active in the Democratic Party, helping to move the Democratic Party towards a place of full acceptance of gay people. That's one of those wonderful footnotes of history. And Richard Socarides is alive and well. And for many of us, watching him become a leader in the gay community after knowing what his father had done, there was some bittersweetness to it, but you can imagine they had their own kind of relationship. So if that's sick, so in the United States, the Supreme Court took care of removing homosexuality as a crime. The APA in 1973 removed it in this country as a sickness. The last remaining category is the category of sin, which is rooted in this week's Parsha. Religion, all base go back to this verse in this week's Parsha, religions all over the world that see themselves rooted in the Jewish Bible. Now we know, we who look at the biblical text through an interpretation have found ways to uncover possible meanings here besides kill all gay people. But that does not exist for many who see this as the root of what God believes. And that religious belief has led, we know, to horrific violence in the name of religion. I consider it bigotry in the name of religion to be a blasphemy against God. And at the same time, here in the United States, I defend the rights of people who want their church to not engage in any acts that look like they support the rights of people to be LGBT. Because we have a powerful First Amendment in this country, which says that the country can neither establish a religion and that each person has the right to practice their own religion. Now, we're facing a very difficult time in this country because we have a Supreme Court, which is now a majority, we can say with certainty, in the right rulings will rule against gay rights. However, there's a tension because we as religious people want to believe that it's possible to have our own religious beliefs. So for instance, I defend the right of the Catholic Church to not have women as priests and not to engage in supporting same-sex marriage because they have the right to determine as a religion what they do inside their church. Now, I support my Catholic siblings who are fighting within the church to change the doctrine within the church. And that's a process that must happen within the church. Just like within Judaism, we transformed our beliefs in my lifetime. Mostly in the time I've been at CBST, we've watched the transformation of the Jewish world from being entirely hostile to LGBT people to being largely welcoming and tolerant in most places, and even welcoming and celebratory in many, many others. In 1973, when CBST was founded, there was not a single rabbi in America, not a single synagogue, not a single Jewish organization that supported the rights of LGBT Jews. Not a single one. Now the landscape has totally changed. But we would not have wanted it to change because the Supreme Court of the United States dictated that to us as a religion. We changed from within. And that is how it should be. And my Orthodox colleagues, some of whom are absolutely on board and some of whom are not, I defend those who are not on board to practice as they want within their synagogues. The question, the tension becomes, what happens when there is a conflict between the rights of an LGBT person and somebody who claims that granting rights to that LGBT person will violate their religious beliefs? And that's where we, as a progressive religious community, have a unique and important voice in this discussion. I do not think, and we need to defend from a government which comes in and forces anybody to behave in a way that's against their religious beliefs. And as my dear friend and legal mind on these issues, Chai Feldblum, says, there needs to be deep nuance on these issues. How to make sure that there is accommodation for individuals to practice their religious beliefs, but at what point, when those religious beliefs come in conflict with LGBT rights, how will that be resolved? Chai has written about how we have to look at each case individually, and there are resolutions possible. Because, of course, there are some conditions under which the government does intrude and say that a religion has to have limitations. For instance, it would be illegal in this country for a religion to say we believe in the sacrifice of children. In that case, the state has a compelling reason to intervene and say, no, in this country, you are not allowed to kill your child in the name of religion. There are certainly limits. You're not allowed to enslave a Black person in the name of religion. We've come to that point in this country. We weren't there in the 1800s. You are not allowed to do certain things in the name of a religion if the state can prove a compelling state interest in preventing that. We will see in the months and years to come with the current Supreme Court lots of debate about this. There will be, and there has been, a lot of misuse of religious freedom in the name of oppression and bigotry against gay people, and we must call it out when that happens. And there will be moments where it's appropriate for somebody to be able to act in a way, and this I will leave up to the legal geniuses in our community, and have their religious beliefs protected. The Catholic Church does not believe in divorce. And in fact, if you get divorced as a Catholic, it's very difficult to get a church ceremony for a second marriage. Of course, we all know the Catholic Church has ways around that, but technically, now, we don't allow the Catholic Church to tell our civil society that if you've been divorced, you cannot remarry in civil law. Can you imagine if they tried to say that, even though they did try to do that same thing about same-sex couples? They said, my religion tells me, based on this verse in this Parsha, that God does not want gay people to get married. Okay, you believe that inside your church, but you have no right to codify that into American civil law. Just like if you, Catholic Church, tried to say to us, nobody who's been divorced can get married with another civil license. If you've been divorced, no, that's it. You don't get no. This country would say, are you kidding? Think about the number of right-wing people who are married multiple times. Nobody would stand for it. So that's an example of where the church's religious position is not allowed to dictate public civil law, but yet there seems to be some confusion about when they can do that about marriage for our people. That's an example of where we must not allow this verse, as interpreted by the Catholic Church, to become codified into civil law. But we do have to be sensitive and thoughtful about how individuals who need religious accommodation should be allowed that. And because I believe in the Bill of Rights and I believe in the Constitution, I think we need to find ways to defend their rights, even when it's abhorrent to us personally, while we make sure to call out bigotry in the name of religion that's trying to insert itself into civil law, into law that affects all of us. Thank God we have a lot of really smart lawyers in the LGBT community. Thank God we have people who are thinking thoughtfully about this. This verse has been used as a weapon against LGBT people for several thousand years. We have the zechut to live in a generation of people who are watching a deeper understanding of this verse and being liberated from it as a weapon, as a violent act against us. And I believe in our understanding of this verse differently. In our understanding that we are all created b'tselem Elohim, and that we are created in the image of God, that we fulfill what the second parsha of these double parshiot is all about. The second parsha is called Kedoshim, and it's all about holiness. And it begins in the very early part of the parsha. It says, I command you to live a life of holiness. Kedoshim tihiyu, you must be holy. You must live a life in which your job every day is to increase holiness in the universe. Do not decrease it. Because I, the pasuk says, am the Holy One. And I am offering you a partnership in creating holiness in the universe. I believe by our understanding of this pasuk differently, we are engaged in what Jews have done forever with our sacred text, to turn it around and around and around again, and to live by the words, not die by them, to hold the complex truth that they present, to not run away from the pain that has been caused by them, and to say, we are a part of a generation. Thank you, God, for allowing me to live, to be in this moment, to bring holiness through our deeper and transformed understanding of sexual orientation and gender identity. And I believe we are part of a generation which is increasing holiness in the universe. And so we fulfill this parsha, the second parsha of Kedoshim. May each of us, may each of you take that spark that's inside of you, surround it with the oxygen and with the energy of goodness that will make it into a bigger light. And may you be a source of Kedusha, of holiness, and increasing Kedusha in whatever corner of the universe you find yourself. And may God bless us all. Shabbat Shalom.